This podcast is brought to you by Free Buddhist Audio, the Dharma for your life. Our work is funded entirely by donations from our generous listeners. If you would like to help us keep this free, make a contribution at freebuddhistaudio.com/donate. Thank you, and happy listening.
Yeah, it's really lovely the way Shuddhakirti evoked the kind of historical and archetypal and mythic dimensions of Padmasambhava this morning, and brought it a bit into the experiential sphere. And it was a bit daunting, actually. It hasn't been at all an easy talk to write this. Padmasambhava is such a rich figure, and there's so many different aspects that you can go into. And what I've decided to do in this talk is to really focus on what I see as a core central aspect, which is the power of present moment awareness. So I'm going to particularly focus on the power of present moment awareness. One quite significant thing happened on May the 4th, 1979.
Star Wars?
Pardon?
Star Wars was released?
Was it?
I don't know, I'm guessing. Is that year?
What did you say? Yeah, there was a general election. I'll check that out. Maybe Star Wars was released on that day as well. But generally, the 4th of May was when Margaret Thatcher was elected, which might seem quite a strange way to start a Padmasambhava talk. But she transformed or revolutionised the political environment, you know. So that was in 1979. So it was a year in this country of a lot of change. And a bit later in the year, in October, Sangharakshita was at the London Buddhist Centre, and he was scheduled to give a talk on Padmasambhava Day at the London Buddhist Centre, and he lost or forgot his notes. I heard Subhuti talking about this event in 1979, and as Sangharakshita was about to go up and give the talk, he just had 3 words on a piece of paper for the whole talk. Subhuti didn't know what those 3 words were, and neither do I. But he gave this particularly kind of rousing talk on Padmasambhava Day. And so I just wanted to read out an excerpt from that talk. So this is Sangharakshita in 1979. Let's try to realise that the spiritual life is essentially, one might say, integrally a process of subjugation and incorporation and integration and transfiguration of all the, as it were, grosser but very powerful and potentially very rich energies of our own consciousness, the collective unconscious even of humanity, as well as of the world in general. If we think of the spiritual life in this way, we shall arrive at a sort of very heroic conception of the spiritual life. A spiritual life is not a running away. A spiritual life is a facing of these energies, a facing of these forces, these processes, of subjugating them and transforming them. So that was what he said. There is much that we want to transform, isn't there? It seems like being humans there's a lot of things we want to change. In ourselves, we might have problems of our digestion, or we suffer from a lack of self-worth, or we find that we really lack energy. We find that we really flare up in anger, and we kind of feel the pain it causes us and other people. And then just at a kind of household level, if we live with others, there might be things in the household a few smiles, we want to transform, like the washing up or slamming doors, and you've probably each got your own lists. And then on a neighbourhood level, I'm part of this Sturchley neighbourhood forum, and there's discontent in the neighbourhood about parking, and about noise at night, and so on. And then at work, might be management styles or workload pressures. And then globally, there's all kinds of things that might cause us stress and unease. climate change, conflict, inequality, and so on. So this issue of transformation is quite central, isn't it, to being human? And no doubt we go through our lives, there's a lot we want to transform. Padmasambhava is sometimes called the master of transformation, So transformation is particularly associated with Padmasambhava. And it's very human, isn't it, to want to avoid suffering. We all want to avoid suffering, and generally want to experience more ease, more creativity, more connection, more aliveness. These kind of urges that we kind of have within us. But where do we direct our energy? Where do we direct our effort to try and bring, the desires of our heart about? What do we believe in that will take us in that direction? So in Buddhism, the traditional term for this is going for refuge. What do we go for refuge to? And I think can be an interesting area to reflect on that in your lives. Where do you feel fulfillment lies, really, or contentment, or ease, creativity, and so on. And unavoidably, before we have any kind of self-consciousness, we are born into particular paradigms, aren't we, or systems of thought and belief around what is a good life, what is a successful life. I mean, from a Buddhist point of view, we come with the momentum from our previous life of what we prioritised or privileged, Then we have school and parents, and we come into a cocktail of kind of programming about how to get the best out of your life and things. So we do live in quite individualistic, materialistic times. I was thinking of this as the promise of acquisitions. We have we're in a culture which holds a lot of promise for acquisitions. If I have that partner, that job, that place, that income, that experience, then, there's a lot of that, isn't there? Trying to engineer our lives to avoid certain people and places and jobs and experiences and so on. So there is an emphasis on kind of curating our lives on the basis of likes and dislikes. I remember I was in Manchester, and I was walking down this road and I saw this big billboard advert, and it said, happiness is a regularly serviced boiler. And I was just kind of thinking, are they really thinking that we might feel that and then buy it for happiness, or is it a joke? I wasn't kind of sure. Happiness is a regularly serviced boiler. It is, yeah. Thank you for sharing what you go for refuge to. Obviously, it's good to put effort into, finding work that, feels fulfilling, having loving connections, living in a nice house. That, they're all very important things. But if our perspective is just at that level, in terms of putting together certain conditions and putting your energy into that, from a Buddhist point of view, that's going to lead to, it's going to make you extremely vulnerable to suffering, that kind of, if there is just that perspective, then it can very easily kind of pit us against each other, because it's a breeding ground for sort of jealousy and rivalry, getting caught up in your self-agenda and not seeing other people and so on. So the Buddha speaks quite eloquently of this in the Attadanda Sutta. He says, seeing humans flopping around like fish in water too shallow, so hostile to one another, you know. Seeing humans flopping around like fish in water too shallow, so hostile to one another. Yeah, it's quite sad, isn't it, really? You know, it's quite sad, this kind of competitiveness and self-focus, really. And it's the water we swim in, you know. So from a Buddhist point of view, whatever is subject to arising is also subject to passing. You know, so even if we get what we want, it's going to be taken away, you know. And so the emphasis in Buddhism is much more on seeing what primarily blights our lives is the power of the three poisons. You know, so the focus is much more on how we relate to what arises and passes in our experience, rather than a grasping or a craving to get the right arisings, you know, in experience. So greed, contracting and wanting what we haven't got. So I'm not used to wearing glasses when I'm giving a talk, so they're kind of bifocal, so you're kind of going in and out of focus. I'm not used to it. Hatred is contracting and not wanting what we are experiencing, and then delusion is just kind of ignoring, you know, ignorance, ignoring. And it's at this level, this deep level, the three poisons, that Padmasambhava is particularly powerful in symbolising. So he actually, if you look at his Katyanga, this star, there's three severed heads there. You know, how he's defeated the forces in him of greed, hatred, and delusion. And I guess many of us have come to the centre because we're disillusioned with ideas, perspectives we get from our culture, you know. We feel there must be something more, you know, and it was that you know, the Buddha went forth from. You know, he felt there must be something more than just old age, sickness and death. And Buddhism does present a radical alternative. It has practices that show us how the forces of greed, hatred and delusion limit us in our lives. And through these practices we see the suffering they're causing. So I think this is really key. Traditionally it's called the defects of samsara, you know, the defects of living an unawakened life. Is that Buddhist practices reveal what we're doing to ourselves, really, the suffering we're creating for ourselves. And the practice helps us cultivate and discover awareness, compassion to transform ourselves, you know. But there's mystery here. What on earth would it be like to be free of the traces of greed, hatred and delusion? You know, what would it be like to be open, sensitive and present in the moment to experience without contracting, without aversion, without grasping, and without ignoring our experience. And that includes grasping at the belief in a separate self. So, I never even contemplated the fact ever before I came across Buddhism that the sense of like me being here and Hannah being there, or me being here and Mary being there, that sense of separation could be conceptual, could be a belief that I'm believing in, you know. So what on earth would it be like for that to be seen through, you know, and that separation to be seen as illusory and causing a lot of suffering, you know. So there's real mystery here. So I want to focus on the transformational power of awareness, which Padmasambhava symbolises. And I'm going to do it. I'm going to try and do it. I haven't done this before. by picking up a core text of Padmasambhava. So this is a text called Seeing Self-Liberation. Seeing Self-Liberation through Self-Liberation through Seeing with Naked Awareness. Self-Liberation through Seeing with Naked Awareness. So this is a text that was written in the 8th century by Padmasambhava, by this great figure. And then he hid it, as was his custom, and then it was discovered, I think it's about 6 centuries later by Karma Lingpa. So it was discovered 6 centuries later. And it's only a short text, but it's extremely deep and profound. So I'm just going to pick out a couple of aspects of it and just try and communicate some of its spirit. So in verse 10, Padmasambhava says, "It's certain that primal awareness, which is one's intrinsic awareness, is unceasing. You should look at your own mind to see whether it is like that or not." So all the way through this text, Padmasambhava is not saying go away and think about it. He's not saying go away and discuss it. He's saying look at your own mind in this moment to see if what I'm saying is true. Yeah. So what I thought I'd do, we'd just do a little exercise here. We'd do a little investigation of looking at our own minds. So if you'd just like to just sit reasonably comfortably, it's only a short exercise. Have you got, if you just kind of close your eyes a bit. Okay, that's the end of the exercise. Was there anything that anybody noticed?
I was trying to work out which bell you were ringing.
Yeah. So you heard a bell, did you? Much so? Did anybody else hear the bell? Yeah.
The gong.
The gong, okay. A bell or gong. Did you have to use any effort to hear the gong?
No.
Or was the gong just heard?
It was a bit loud for me, so I had a little bit of aversion.
You had a response to it, yeah.
Bit of aversion.
You had a bit of aversion, so that would have followed the hearing. So there was a sensitivity to the arising of sound without an effort to be aware of the sound. You agree?
Mm-hmm.
So we can tend to think awareness comes and goes, but maybe there is a background awareness that's always here, you know. So let's do one more little exercise on this. We're just testing this little bit of the verse. Can you be completely unaware for the next 20 seconds? Turn off awareness. Okay, how did we get on?
More aware.
There was more awareness.
If one could sleep.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I
Yeah.
That's all that
It's going to be very asleep immediately.
Just in that 20 seconds.
I was trying to force my mind ahead to what's been annoying me recently.
Yeah.
You know, the things that normally sort of go round and round in my head, which take me away from
Yeah.
mindfulness at the present moment. It's actually quite hard. One
Yeah.
thing, I can't be aware. I've got to think about this, 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 and this.
That's it, yeah. But
And also, it's just, I find it quite interesting because I thought I had to think about being aware, but I don't. So I experience my mouth without having to think about it, which I found really interesting. Because I was
Yeah.
just going, okay, what does that mean, not to be aware? But then awareness was already there.
yeah. So, good. So I'd like to move on. We've still got a bit more of the text to go, but just if you can just bear that in mind. So verse 17, your own awareness is intrinsically knowing, intrinsically clear, and luminously brilliant. Your own awareness is intrinsically knowing, intrinsically clear, and luminously brilliant. So when we have thoughts about ourselves, do we include this kind of view? Do we have this sense of ourselves? We don't learn it at school. It wasn't generally part of our culture, is it? This view of innate purity. But it's very strong in Buddhism, you know. So the text draws that out. And then in verse 13, it gets even more mysterious. This self-originated clear light, which from the very beginning was in no way produced by something antecedent to it, is the child of awareness, and yet it is itself without any parents. Amazing. This self-originated primordial awareness has not been created by anything. Amazing. It does not experience birth, nor does exist a cause for its death. Amazing. Although it is evidently visible, yet there is no one there who sees it. Amazing. Although it has wandered throughout samsara, it has come to no harm. Amazing. Even though it has seen Buddhahood itself, it has not come to any benefit from this. Amazing. Even though it exists in everyone everywhere, yet it has gone unrecognised. Amazing. Nonetheless, you hope to attain some other fruit than this elsewhere. Amazing. Even though it exists within yourself and nowhere else, yet you seek for it elsewhere. Amazing. So this is quite good news, isn't it, in a way? This is quite good news. That, you know, for all the difficulties we have in our lives, you know, and in the world, this is saying that we have a dimension within us that whatever we've been through is radiant with qualities, you know, qualities of awareness. And it exists, so to speak, exists is always a bit of a problematic word in Buddhism, it exists in everyone, you know. So it's not just the clever people, it's not the monks, it's not just people who've been practicing 30 years and so on. It's a dormant potential in all of us, which as we... so it can't be harmed by anything that arises in it. So we return here to some of the symbolism of the Padmasambhava, and you'll see he's often holding, as Shuddhakirti was earlier today, the Vajra, you know, which the diamond thunderbolt, which is symbolising the indestructibility, you know, of our true nature, you know. And it's full of qualities. So in Buddhism there's the 5 wisdoms that signify 5 dimensions of qualities that this innate intrinsic awareness has. And often the Padmasambhava's got this on his cap. You see he's got these 5 jewels here that symbolise the 5 wisdoms. So in some ways the Bodhisattvas, Padmasambhava, they can easily seem quite alien and exotic. You know, they come from foreign lands and they've got funny clothes on, and we can project all kinds of things onto them as figures. But I prefer to see them as like a mirror. It's like they're mirroring back to us what we're not conscious of, that's our deeper nature, you know. They're mirroring back our potential and what we truly are, you know. But we've got confused. So And as we begin to break through of the entanglements of kind of thoughts of the past and thoughts of the future, and as we start to kind of transform the three poisons, this jewel, to use that language, can be gradually uncovered, and then its qualities, this radiant luminous awareness, starts to kind of shine through us into the world, and then help us transform the demons that are still kind of limiting us, you know. So Sangha actually put this in 3 words, which I thought was great. He said, awareness is revolutionary. You know, awareness is revolutionary. So this is the point where I surprise you all, apart from Eve, who's seen it before. So, come on out, come on. There we go. Wow. So this is the most dazzling purport I've ever seen in my life. It's kindly on loan from Vajraloka, and Padmasambhava's often got it kind of tucked into his belt. You know, probably not one quite as big as this, which is really, really rich in symbolism. And it's got 3 blades, 1, 2, 3, and they symbolise the 3 poisons: greed, hatred and delusion. So cutting through the 3 poisons. And it's funny, I was walking up the road with this, and I was thinking, I could actually get apprehended with this in my hand. I was thinking, or I could get into trouble with it, you know. So I was a bit nervous walking up the road with it. So this symbolises the potential of our intrinsic awareness, our awareness, to cut through greed, hatred and delusion, and as Shuddhakirti was saying this morning. But it's not a offensive weapon, you know. It pins down. It doesn't kind of attack. It pins down, so our demons can be seen, you know. So it's a bit like a museum exhibit with the pins, you know. They're kind of and then they're kind of held over time under the power of awareness, you know, and they're really seen, you know, clearly. And in that seeing clearly, they lose their power over us. They discharge energy, unfold, we experience relief in the body. And then they become awareness, you know, they're transformed into awareness. So the Vajra gets a bit more powerful with each demon that's transformed. So again, we've got the indestructible Vajra there as well, and endless other bits of symbolism. So I feel more confident holding this, and I'd like you to feel more confident. So I'm going to ask the noble Shuddhakirti, would you better, do you want to hold it for a while and then pass it around? It is very heavy, actually.
It's heavier than Shuddhakirti.
Yes. That's it.
What's it called, did you say?
Purba, yeah.
How's that spelled, sorry?
Phurabha. Yeah. It's partly because it's Tibetan and it comes, and there's a nomadic culture, so they live a lot in tents and temporary things which were pinned down. So they think it has that kind of link, you know, with their nomadic culture. So if we've got this great dazzling jewel, to call it that, in us, why do we suffer still, you know? So I'm going to go back to the text again here, pick it up. So verse 4 says, even though its inherent nature has existed from the very beginning, you have not recognised it. Even though its clarity and presence has been uninterrupted, you have not yet encountered its face. Even though its arising has nowhere been obstructed, still you have not comprehended it. Yeah. So it's very, very clear, isn't this? This goes right back to the 8th century, you know. Some of you will be familiar with the jewel in the lotus parable. The jewel in the robe parable from the White Lotus Sutta. Where this the jewel within is put into a parable. But this jewel is not a thing. You know, we tend to think in terms of objects. objects. There's me and then there's this thing that's a jewel. This is where the language kind of can get in the way. It's maybe more what's looking, what looks. Invisible, formless, empty, void-like, shapeless, but luminous, with qualities. And if you think of awareness itself, like we're familiar with being aware to some degree, does awareness have a shape? Does it have a colour? Can we touch it? All the normal ways we relate to objects don't seem to apply with awareness. It's mysterious. But our present moment awareness, the momentary awareness, is a gateway. It's a sliding gateway into this intrinsic awareness of the dazzling kind of full of dazzling qualities. So let's go back to the text. So why do we suffer? What's gone wrong? By not recognising the intrinsic awareness for what it is, you will then search for your mind somewhere outside of yourself. If you seek for yourself elsewhere, outside yourself, how can you ever find yourself? For example, this is just like an idiot who, going into a crowd of people and having let himself become confused because of the spectacle, does not recognise himself, and even though he searches for himself everywhere, he continually makes the error of mistaking others for himself. Similarly, since you do not see the natural condition of the real disposition of things, you do not know that appearances come from mind, so you are thrust once again into samsara. So again, we're confused. We have an experience, but we're kind of confused. And Padmasambhava wants to lead us out of this confusion. And I'm aware when I talk about this, it can seem very abstract and remote, like just words. But I think it can be really helpful to just understand it at the level of a view or a paradigm, because it can help us, even on a rational level, conceptual level, just hold a bit more lightly the sense that self and other are real and unquestioned. Hold on a bit more lightly the fact that things that matter exists and that there's solid objects, and hold more lightly the view that if anything has any value, it's seen. So this is an invitation to consider the possibility that there's a whole dimension to our experience that we don't see, that is formless, but is full of qualities that when we start to see, it starts to transform us, So I want to look a bit more at the being blinded by the spectacle, this marketplace and getting blinded by the spectacle, which leads us back a bit into the demons. So one way of looking at this jewel of intrinsic awareness is that it's covered with demons. And we were looking at those this morning, weren't we? And it seems like I'm not alone, that other people have things, demons and things they'd like to transform. And sometimes these demons are called like karmic obscurations, or the Buddhist tradition calls them adventitious defilements. There's some lovely words, adventitious defilements. And these demons manifest at a behavioural level, don't they? We know that in ourselves and in people around us. Unskillful behaviour, selfishness, cruelty, insensitivity, aggressiveness, blocking people, getting infatuated with people, and so on. But according to Buddhism, everything is driven by something else. And a lot of our behaviour is driven by emotions, and a lot of our unskillful behaviour is driven by unresolved, painful emotions, like anger, shame, lack of self-worth, loneliness, fear, and so on. And then the grooves of these emotions and behaviours are often laid in childhood. You know, their soil in a way is childhood consciousness. You know, as kids we're very, very sensitive and feel things strongly and easily get overwhelmed. And to the degree we're not in a kind of self-held, safe-held, loving environment, that can easily go into the body, you know, behind tension. And so they can be hard to see because we've grown up in them and of them, you know, and so on. And then we know now through science that the unresolved emotions that have got somaticised, so to speak, in our body, they don't just drive behaviour and feeling states, they dysregulate the nervous system. You know, and the nervous system is making sure that our kind of digestion system works. You know, it's making sure that we've got the right hormonal balance, and all kinds of syndromes and bodily issues can come from, as we know now in science, you know, big studies have been done from not processing emotion. That it's been trapped and held in the body. So what do demons need? What do demons need? So I think demons need to enter deeply into the realm of Padmasambhava. That's what I think. Demons need to come into relationship with the healing, accepting, mysterious, fearless, safe, loving, non-judgmental spaciousness of present moment awareness. You know, I don't know anything else that is more healing than bringing our painful emotions into relationship with present moment awareness. Allow their energies to come into relationship with the qualities of awareness that we all have, you know, to some extent. And this is where the demons can be fully met, seen, felt, where their sort of tangoed cargo of emotion, beliefs and energy can be brought into the light. And I think on a deep level, the demons come to us, you know, they're seeking this, they want to be liberated, you know, our feelings of shame, grief, sadness, anger, they're all in kind of they're often kind of young, child, frightened emotion, you know, in age. And they want, from their side, to be out of that constriction, you know, and that suffering. And they're drawn towards the qualities of awareness, you know. If you can cultivate a sense of mindful presence and cultivate a sense of being curious about experience, you know, and being sensitive to your present moment experience, they have a way out, in a way, have a way out of the body.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because I think sometimes when you meditate more, sometimes the demons come up and you think that you're going off track because all this stuff comes up.
Yeah.
But like, actually, it's because you're holding a space for them to sort of be liberated. Yeah, meditation is a great space for this, you know, to say hello. But this, I've skipped something here. I wanted to give a personal example here. It's a bit of a dramatic example from my own life. I've never shared this before publicly. But this happened a few years ago, actually. It was a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. I was in. I've been doing this training course in Germany, and because of the pandemic, it was, we weren't allowed to meet in person. So instead of going to Cologne, I went and stayed with a friend in Edinburgh, who I was on the course with. And I went up in quite a good mood. You know, I think the weather was good, and I was looking forward to seeing him, and lots of nice restaurants nearby and things. And
we had the first day of the training and things, and thought it was fine. I went to bed, and this is the time when what's held in the body can arise. I think a lot of the problems with people's sleep is often unresolved emotions coming into the space, disrupting the space of sleep. But I just woke up after an hour or two, and my what was arising in my body was strong energies and strong emotions, and I was taken back. My body went into this kind of thing where I went back to this playground. And what happened was that when I grew up, I went to school, primary and junior school, in quite a small kind of village. And then when I got to about 12, I think it was, I went to this big London Overspill town and went to this huge secondary school. And within the first few days of being there, I got into this conflict with this guy in the playground. And I don't know what your schools were like, but in my school then, as soon as there was any prospect of two people fighting each other, it became like a Roman amphitheatre, And so people would literally say "scrap," and then across the playground, and then literally I don't know how many people surrounded us, and I'm just a first year, from this little village, and suddenly in this massive school. And I froze, actually, and me and this other guy had a standoff, and we were being goaded to fight, and I froze. And it had a massive impact on me. It was like from that morning, more my confidence went, and I became much quieter and much more withdrawn. And that literally went on for years, I felt so much shame I couldn't talk about it, and humiliation, and there's all kind of stories about what I should have done. Anyway, I'm in Edinburgh 40 years later, almost 40, is that right? Yeah, 40 years later. I'm back there, and there was one of the things was, it was what my body would have wanted to have done if it wasn't in freeze, so I started to get this anger, fight energy. And I just decided to stay with it. I could have just got unsettled and, gone off and went for a walk or read a magazine or something. But I just decided to drop into awareness and trusted myself enough to let it run its course. And I had all these waves of emotion and energy coming up over hours that night. I'm very, very tired the next day. I went on the course. And then the following night it happened again. Hours, different aspects, that I got overwhelmed with and got trapped in the body. And then the next night it happened again. And then, so I was absolutely exhausted really, but something had opened up in me where, these demons came into a really powerful relationship with present moment awareness, and it kept kind of releasing and discharging. And now I feel able to talk about it much more easily, and it hasn't come back in meditations. It would sometimes try and come back into meditations and things. So that's a personal example there of liberating kind of demons. But it's not, as we know, this isn't easy. It's easy to talk about it, but to allow our demons to be felt in the body with curiosity over time, often emotions don't feel good. These emotions don't feel good. Often there's a lot of fear that has been the reason why they've got trapped in us, So we do really need all the support we can get, in terms of doing this deeper work, friendship, study, community, retreats, whatever helps support us with this. But if we keep wanting to be elsewhere when these emotions come up, they'll never meet that healing ground, within us. And often this is a gradual process. We start with the more mild stuff, like the irritations that Shuddhakirti was talking about. And then over years we can develop more resilience or tolerance to bring present awareness in the body over time and stay connected with ourselves when more difficult things come. So I do think there's so much to be gained from transforming demons, but it's not quick and it's not easy, to be honest. Oh good, I'm not doing too bad for time. That's good. So, are you still with me? I know I'm rattling through a lot here. So effort is an area that Padmasambhava talked about. So let's go back to the text. Just as is the case with the sesame seed being the cause of the oil and the milk being the cause of butter, but where the oil is not obtained without pressing and the butter is not obtained without churning, so all sentient beings, even though they possess the actual essence of Buddhahood, will not realise Buddhahood without engaging in practice. Yeah. So this isn't a case of just kind of relaxing and opening, because there's such a momentum, a karmic momentum that's come out of ignorance and confusion, So we do somehow need to kind of step against the tide of the momentum and use some effort. So I think a really helpful question is, what helps us in life to be present and aware? What helps us in life? When are we most present and aware? And, what helps us be present and aware? Do we need to slow down, give more space? Do we need to actually do more, than what we're doing? Do we need to meditate more? Do we need to be more in nature? Do we need more contact with friends? Do we need to study and get inspired? Do we need to go on retreat? Do we need to find somewhere in the house that's quiet? Do you see? And everybody's kind of different here about what is it that unlocks us into a mode of being when we're more present and aware. So I'm going to suggest there's 4 questions here. This is like a kind of inviting Padmasambhava exercise. 4 really simple questions, and it's based on the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So the first question, that this can help us see what's in the way of our awareness, in a way quite simple, is to ask ourselves the question, what's actually happening? So for me at the moment, on a mental level, I'm partly wondering what you're making of my talk. And on a bodily level, I can feel some warmth in my hands, and it's quite pleasant, the contact of my legs with the mat. And I can feel a slight coolness because my shirt's slightly lifted up on my lower back. So this is tuning into the knowing aspect of present moment awareness. What's actually happening. There's the thoughts and stories, and then there's the sight, there's the smell, there's the taste, there's the touch, there's the hearing. What's actually happening? So actually opening to the senses outside of thinking, which tends to dominate. And then the next question is, what's the feeling tone? So the Buddha talked loads about Vedana and feeling tone. So this is quite simple. Is it pleasant? Is it unpleasant? Or is it neutral? So for me at the moment, my body is feeling reasonably kind of pleasant. I've got a bit of tightness in my lower belly. And there's a little bit of tightness in the upper chest. But broadly, my feeling tone is quite pleasant at the moment. I don't feel like I want to get away from it. It feels reasonably pleasant. So tuning into the Vedana level, the pleasant, unpleasant, neutral's an important aspect of this. And then, this is the real gold one, I really love this, is how am I with it? Yeah. So this could be great to do when you've had a row with your partner or something, or somebody at work's really pissed you off or something, and you feel stuck in some contracted state. Bring present moment awareness to it if it feels within the range of what you can do, turning to it that directly. Allow it to come into relationship with awareness. So what's actually happening? I've got all these thoughts about what a bugger my boss is, and I wish they'd go, and la la la, but tune into the other senses. What is this, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral? And then how am I with it? Am I trying to kind of bring in like something else that's pleasant on top of it? Am I fighting what I'm feeling? Am I trying to ignore what I'm feeling, the three poisons? And the fourth question, is anything else possible? So often when we're experiencing dukkha or suffering, one of the three poisons will be strong. There's resistance. There's fighting the moment, So the fourth question is anything else possible? So this is an invitation to the qualities of Padmasambhava in a way. Can I be curious about what's happening? Can I be open to what's happening? Can I be sensitive to what's happening? Can I become intimate in the moment with what's happening? You see, it's this coming into relationship with. So they're the four kind of questions. So that can help us see what's in the way of us being connected with ourselves, and also maybe a taste of what happens when we have a different response to what's happening from what we might habitually be used to. Kind of thing. And Padmasambhava came into a deep, profound relationship with experience, which wasn't primarily mental, emotional and energetic dimensions, and what lies beyond that. So I'm going to finish now. I just wanted to say a little bit about as healing deepens, or as transformation deepens. So as the power of our demons is transformed in awareness, there's a spiritual death happenings, in particular a weakening of the ego. So we're going to return to Sangharakshita here. Sangharakshita said, the ego is not a thing, but a faulty interpretation. One is seeing something that just isn't there. It never was, and it never will be. And because it isn't there, one can't do anything with it, get rid of it, go beyond it, or whatever. And often the ego's talked about in those terms, isn't it? That was my bit, not Sangharakshita. If the ego is shown to be an illusion, one's fears on its behalf are extinguished. And how many fears arise out of belief in ego, You see that there is no one to lose anything, and so you have nothing to lose. So the ego is not a thing, but a faulty interpretation. One is seeing something that just isn't there. It never was, and it never will be. And because it isn't there, one can't do anything with it, get rid of it, go beyond it, or whatever. If the ego is shown to be an illusion, one's fears on its behalf are extinguished. You see that there is no one to lose anything, and so you have nothing to lose. And go back to Padmasambhava, and he's normally holding a skull cap. He is on both of those in his left hand. And this represents the death of the ego. And so as the grasping of the belief in the separate self loosens, spiritual rebirth starts to arise. And this is symbolised by the blood in the skull cap, the amrita of bliss that the Padmasambhava quaffs. So this is the fruits of insight, awakening, or bodhicitta. And so this is where the jewel really starts to shine through us. And the main obscuration of the jewel, the attachment to ego self, is seen through, as Sangharakshita was saying. And then we start to see that our ordinary mind is based in and of a vast open sky-like spaciousness that's percolated by love, kindness, a great mystery of not knowing, of wonder. And this is, in a sense, is a symbolic representation of that. You know, these are figures of light, open, empty, spacious, sky-like. But that open, empty, spacious dimension, shunyata, as it's often called, is percolated with qualities. So as humans, we tend to see the form aspect quite to some degree. We see the arising and passing of appearances, and we call them forms, you know, we think they're solid. But we don't, and until insight happens, we don't see the formless dimension, you know. So this is really an opening into life. It's a deeper opening into life. So I'm going to finish now, just with another. We're going to go back to the Atadanda Sutta, go back to the Pali Canon. If you do not grasp at anything in the present, you will go about at peace.
We hope you enjoyed this week's podcast. Please help us keep this free. Make a contribution at freebuddhistaudio.com/donate. And thank you.